Hi, my name is Brooke Medeiros. I apologize for my appearance. I just found out some upsetting information about my grandfather, but regardless, let's get into it. So I have the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe, and the limbic lobe, which is encircling the diencephalon and the cross-sectional view we have here. We have the central sulcus located here, lateral sulcus located here, the parietal occipital sulcus located here, and we have the cingulate sulcus located here. Now, moving along specifically to the frontal lobe, we have the precentral gyrus, which is also known as the primary motor cortex, which is involved in initiating voluntary movement, such as raising your hand. Located interior to that, and superiorly, we have the supplementary motor cortex. Beneath that is the premotor cortex. They're both also involved in initiating voluntary movement, but this movement is more complex. It can be seen as things like planning or speech function. Beneath that, we have an area down here known as Broca's area, which is made up of the opercular and triangular parts. This is located in one hemisphere of the brain and is typically located in the left hemisphere, and this is involved in the production of written and spoken language. The remainder of the frontal lobe is known as the prefrontal cortex and is responsible for personality, foresight, and insight. Moving along, we have the parietal lobe. This is known as the postcentral gyrus, also known as the primary somatosensory cortex. This is responsible for initiating cortical processing of tactile and proprioceptive information. Located here, we have the supramarginal gyrus and the angular gyrus. Together, they make up the inferior parietal lobule, which is responsible for comprehension and language. The remainder of the parietal lobe is responsible for spatial orientation. Moving along to the temporal lobe, we have the superior, middle, and inferior gyri with the superior and inferior sulci. Located in the posterior region of the superior temporal gyrus is known as Wernicke's area. This is also in one hemisphere of the brain and is involved with the comprehension of speech and language. And then folded in the walls of the superior temporal gyrus is known as the primary auditory cortex, which is involved in processing auditory input. Moving along to the occipital lobe, we have the ceneus, the lingual gyrus, and then the occipital temporal gyrus. Between the ceneus and lingual gyrus is known as the calcarine sulcus. Located within the walls of the calcarine sulcus is the primary visual cortex, which is responsible for processing visual information. And then the remainder of the occipital lobe is known as the visual association cortex, which is responsible for processing higher end visual input. And lastly, moving along to the limbic lobe, in the superior region, we have what is known as the cingulate gyrus. Beneath that, down here in the inferior region, beneath the diencephalon, is known as the parahippocampal gyrus. Located in this region of the parahippocampal gyrus is known as the uncus, which is responsible for emotion and memory. And then deep beneath the parahippocampal gyrus is an area known as the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and spatial navigation. Now together, these structures make up the limbic lobe, and then the limbic lobe, as well as other structures in the brain, make up what is known as the limbic system. Together, they're responsible for memory, learning, emotional response, and drive-related behavior. Thank you.